I'm delighted to welcome you to the free webinar, Suha Moves for Thrutopian Wellbeing. I'm Chris Johnstone in the northeast of Scotland. I'm joined by my dear friend and colleague Madeleine Young in Oxford. And I want to start with a question, and it's really about wondering whether you um, can think of situations where you've just asked yourself the question, how am I going to get through this? And that's really our starting point, those situations where you're scratching and thinking, how am I going to get through this? Because I want to unpack our title, Suha Moves for Thrutopian Wellbeing. There's a whole collection of what may be unfamiliar words there. And I love this word, Thrutopian. So if utopian is everything's going completely fine, which is lovely when it happens, the ideal society, but it often feels so far away that people say, "Oh, what benefit is that?" I don't really believe in that. It's kind of it's not helpful to me. Um, Maybe helpful in terms of direction, but it can often seem out of reach. And then dystopia may be much more familiar where things are going wrong. And Throughtopia is about starting where we are, and it's the journey of making it through to a better state in the best way that we can. And that's an aspiration, the best way that we can, because a friend of mine who says, I always do my best, but my best varies. And our best will vary too. But if we have a sense of Throughtopia is okay, I'm going to get through this. And I'm seeing if it's possible for me to get through this well. And this storyline of making it through in the best possible way, we can apply at all kinds of levels. And I want to introduce the idea of me, you, and us as three levels that we can apply this through Topian storyline, story pattern to. So, me is about how am I going to get through this? But you might be supporting someone else. You might have someone close to you and they're going through a very difficult time. And you think, how are you going to get through this? And you really want to be an ally and supporter of their getting through. Might be informal, it might be a friend or family member, but it might also be a professional supporting relationship where you're helping somebody else in a struggle zone, facing a challenge where you want to help them through. And also, I'm aware in these difficult times that we live in, these times of challenge, that there's a big question around of some challenges like the climate crisis, for example, the cost of living crisis. There may be times where we think, how are we going to get through? How are we going to get through this? And I want to introduce Suha moves and this idea of really looking at what can we do? What can we do when we're facing a challenge, when we think, how am I going to make it through? And Suha is a new design well-being practice system. We've been working on it quite a time, and we've been having three or four Suha courses over the last year. Madeline and I particularly working together on this. And what we're wanting to do is say, in the difficult times that we're in, the challenging times we're in, that a lot of well-being practices are fantastic and helpful, but also really miss out important things around some of the challenges we face. And, like how do many of the well-being practices address the issues like climate change or the increase in anxiety and depression as our world becomes more scary and depressing. And so this idea of Suha is really about how do we protect our mental health? How do we protect our well-being? And also, how do we move to a more satisfying way of life? And we're going to be looking at this idea of Suha as a bit like Tai Chi or yoga. It's a well-being practice system, but it's for not just personal well-being, but for collective well-being too. And one move I just like to introduce really early on is a move called Pathways of Possibility. And any of you've done any resilience training with me might be familiar with this one, this idea of just holding out a hand. And each digit, each thumb or finger, represents a different way that things can go. Things could go better, things could go worse. And when we're facing something challenging and we're asking ourselves, how am I going to make it through? Or how are we going to make it through? Or you're supporting someone else and you're thinking, how are they going to make it through? You're thinking, what's the best that can happen here? What are some better versions of the way things might go? And Suha is a system of moves that support us in that Thrutopian adventure, finding a way through in the best possible way.